Alex, great to have you. Where do we find you?
Thank you for having me. Well, I'm based in my office, which is in the IBM Hursley ground, so down in Hampshire.
Lovely Friday afternoon, sunny in your part of the country.
Well, it's not raining. It's definitely cloudy right now. So sun, maybe a little bit during the day. But yeah, it's a nice afternoon in late September.
We go a long way. We know each other from many years. For our listeners, why don't you give us a brief introduction about who you are, what do you do?
Yeah, well, thank you. I've been working in the design industry for about 20 years. I trained as a designer at university and went into industry to be a designer and worked my way up. That was the first 7 years of my career. I then got around 2007, got some early exposure to the user experience as a concept and found that it just clicked and resonated with myself. Ever since then, I've really tried to focus on user experience design, which is now more folded into product design and the work that we're doing together. Obviously, we worked together at John Lewis. I think it was around 2017, 18, on a number of projects. I have done 3 or 4 different jobs for them over the years, including when we worked on the apps team, but also the main website teams. Yeah, generally now my experience is very much broader, more experienced approach to user experience design and product design.
So it's really fascinating to have somebody who's seasoned, who have been through the rise, the early heyday of UX design, all the way to that transition of how this entire design industry, especially user-centered design, as it used to be called, evolved into UX, and now it's product design. I would love to hear your view on what has changed for good or for bad.
Okay, that's quite a good question. There's lots to kind of unpick there. I trained as a designer. I went to university, not that that's relevant nowadays, but I went to university, I was trained as a designer. So my background is very much what's the problem, what causes the problem, and from that point you can start to shape solutions. Now, when I started out in industry around 2002, I was trying to be a graphic designer. In those days, we called ourselves new media designers. We were playing with Flash and Director and doing some generally quite fun stuff without many kind of guidelines and rules. It wasn't necessarily good from an accessibility or usability point of view, but it was definitely fun from a design exploration point. Whilst I really enjoyed that, I realized very quickly that I wasn't really a graphic designer. I was much more kind of focused on functionality and making things better for people. And that's kind of when I discovered UX, as I mentioned already, around 2007. And what I particularly enjoyed working with then during those days was the roles are very segmented. You had a researcher, you had a UX designer, you had a UI designer who would do some very amazing interactions. Researcher would go and do deep research with users, and working together is really collaborative and fun. However, what's really changed now is a lot of those roles have kind of been blended into one, and called a product designer. I don't think the design approach has really changed. We still have to go and find the problem, ultimately find out what causes the problem, and then work on the solutions. The job titles have changed. The expectation of our clients has changed. People don't necessarily want to build a team of researchers, product design, UX designers, UI designers, content designers, because there's a cost associated to that. So they go after this unicorn we talk about in industry. And product design, which is ultimately what I am, what we are now, is really just a blend of a lot of those different roles into one. But yeah, obviously looking at what's best for the customer, but also what works for the business. We have to deliver business value, otherwise it's going to be impossible to deliver customer value.
You touched upon the lines being blurred, but at the same time, the rise of the unicorn. What's your view on somebody who's trained over many years to become a unicorn versus somebody who is starting afresh with a new tool set, and then the expectation from them being they have to deliver unicorn level output?
I think it's challenging, isn't it? Because if I look at where I am now and the skills that I have and the capabilities that I have, that's come from years of experience, not necessarily from university or degree. University degree taught me how to be a designer, to how to explore ideas and try different stuff. But a lot of that nowadays you can get taught, through apprenticeships, through work experience. As long as you've got people around you that teach you that, you don't have to do it at university. But the rest of it comes from experience. The rest of it comes from experience. So you learn from the job. And if I look at the work that I'm doing today, right now, and I've just come out of a client meeting, and the advice that I'm providing that client is based on experiences over the last 3 to 4 years. Processes have moved on. The way we work in an agile team has changed. It's evolved. So stuff that I knew 10 years ago might give me some experience because we've had some of these problems before, but the way of working then is very different to now because we're constantly moving. So if I'm looking in hindsight about training and education and design, there's a lot we can learn in terms of foundation, but then most of the expertise we do now is based on the job, your learning experience. So for new people hitting the market and being expected to deliver, as you say, a unicorn ability, which no one really can, let's be honest here. But, let's say you're a new product designer and you're expected to know research, you're expected to know how to present to senior stakeholders. It's virtually impossible, but you do need to learn that. And so jumping at the deep end is part of the way we do that. And being surrounded by people who have that experience, who can support you along that journey is super, super important. It's harder perhaps if you're in a smaller organization where that support team isn't around you. If you're in a large agency or large company with leads and heads that have that experience, you can learn and absorb, and you have some form of safety rails to help advise. Harder if you're new to it. There's lots of perhaps senior labeled designers that don't necessarily have that experience. I get why they're doing it because that's the ask of the job level. There are less junior or entry level jobs available in the market, so people feel they have to promote themselves as more senior and experienced. But the challenge there is you don't necessarily have the experience or knowledge to deal with the problems that you have with clients. And we talked about working at John Lewis together. John Lewis its apps take hundreds of millions in revenue. Its website is in the billions. And as designers, as product managers, as researchers working on that scale and size platform, you can't make decisions or advise the company on how to do things unless you've got that experience and expertise to make those informed decisions, because there's a huge risk. I'm an independent consultant. I have to carry massive liability insurance because if I go into a company like that, tell them to move something around, it could equally impact their revenue from a negative point of view. I could wipe 10 million off their annual revenue. So I have to make sure that the expertise I pull on is validated and I'm working with other experts in the team that we can support each other to make sure we're not taking those huge risks.
Who were the people who played that role as you were blossoming into the domain and the profession?
The mentors that I had really were people I worked with in the jobs, whether they were junior or more senior than me, more experienced, less experienced, because I tend to find in design I've just come out of a meeting now where some of the input I've had is that, user experience, product design, whatever you want to call it now, is a team sport. It's about collaboration. So the idea that one person in a team has the solution and everyone else then actions that solution, to me is crazy. We know that that's not user experience. We know that's not product design or service design, because 90% of that work is about talking to others, learning from others. And those people you talk and learn from, the subject matter experts or the clients or the users, sometimes know less than you, sometimes know more than you. So having someone more senior in the industry that can show you the right process is important. But then also what I find I learn most from is just from collaborating with people.
Tell me more about how do you keep yourself updated with the latest trends?
To stay up to date with the latest trends, latest ways of working, I tend to do a lot of online research, a lot of reading, a lot of staying involved in what's going on in the industry. I don't quite get to as many events or meetups as I'd like. However, I do try to get into client offices as much as possible. One thing we always took for granted as designers over the last, and I'm talking about up to the point of COVID, is that we were always in the office, whether it's client side or whether it's agency side, you're always in a space with lots of other designers or other people involved in that field. And so you tend to, I guess, through osmosis, through working with other people, you learn new things. COVID meant obviously we're all at home or we're all in an office of your own, on your own, which is fine if you've got lots of experience or, are regularly working with others through remote calls and stuff. But that isolation can lead to a little bit of less learning. So you have to make more effort to understand what's going on. At the moment, we're seeing a lot of innovation in the field. We're seeing a lot of change in the tooling that we're using in the process, which will enhance our abilities as designers to do things better, faster, maybe with more value added into it. And at the moment, it seems to be a bit of a discovery phase because of all this new tooling, all this new technology that's coming our way. My way of learning it is just to jump in, learn, try it, see if it fits into my process, what value can it add to me and my process, what value can it add to the client or customers. And if I can't see the value, then I drop it and move on to something else.
Tell me more about your process, especially going and finding new prospects as an independent consultant. And what are the insights you can share for people who are new?
My advice to anyone starting out in the career ladder in the design field is really to focus on that human element, that reaching out and connecting with people. When I look at when I graduated a long time ago in 2002, I finished university. I was at university in London, Goldsmiths. We ran a design exhibition in a gallery in Camden. We invited lots of industry to come along. They saw our work, they interacted with us. A few of us lucky people got offered jobs out of it. It was a very different time. I got work placement out of my university, but I got a freelance job straight out of my exhibition. Someone came up to me, liked what I'd been doing, wanted me to then pitch in. Back in those days, we ended up working for a few weeks pitching to Egg Bank a load of concepts. It was great fun, huge learning curve, but it wasn't a long-lasting job. But that led on to the next thing. So I've had quite a lucky phase in my career in the sense that when I moved into user experience design around 2007, 2008, there was a growing demand for that type of skill set. There wasn't a lot of supply. When I started independently as an independent consultant, my own company in 2014, I didn't have to do a lot. I just had to go onto LinkedIn, network, promote myself, and I got offered work back to back. I mean, there was a point when I was getting 10 to 15 propositions a month through LinkedIn. I didn't have to go out and apply, and I go from one job to the other to the other. Things are very changed now, and this is a natural progression in industry. We've seen a boom in that field. We've seen some ups and downs. Obviously, we're probably in a bit of a down at the moment, but we've also then seen loads of new talent coming into the field and loads of talent progressing up a career path. So you end up with more resource, more designers, more people in the field, obviously, because there was demand before. Now more people have gone into it. I still think there's huge demand from clients, from industry. There's just a lot more competition. There's a lot more people doing it. So what I have been doing over the last couple of years is a lot of research from one stealth startup project I've been working on, researching with recruiters what their process is. And the recruiters are talking about their process, very standard. They'll advertise a job. It will go out to multiple job boards, including LinkedIn. 1,000+ people will apply. But that recruiter is trying to get that list to 20. And the 20 they will speak to, and then they'll choose 3 to 5 that they're going to perhaps put forward to the end customer, their client, their hiring manager for the job, for interviews. So really, when you're applying for a job, you're trying to get into that top 20. And the way that most of the recruiters we spoke to as part of this research was saying is that when they're looking for that top 20, they're almost not combing through those 1,000, 1,500. They're almost going to contacts that they know, people that they've worked with before. It reminds me that when I went back into I did industrial placement as part of my university degree. I went and worked for an agency in London called Imagination, and I had to go and deliver CVs by hand. I'd go and knock on the door and walk into the agency. I was petrified. It's a massive agency. It's still up there in Store Street. Walk in and find the director or head of design and hand over my CV and go, "Oh, hi, I'm a university student. Can you give me some placement?" But what that interaction did is it got you noticed. So sticking your CV in an envelope and posting it, which is what we did in those days, otherwise wouldn't get you noticed. And so that human element is super important. I know it's really hard. If you're a graduate or you are moving into the field, the human element, the interaction, the meeting people, faces, talking is what's going to land you jobs, not clicking easy apply on LinkedIn. That's just going to end you up in that 1,500 people pot.
Easy apply, in my opinion, is a curse. It's because it guarantees that it's going into a recruiter's bottom of the pile section.
The easy apply guarantees that your connection goes into some system. Whether the actual human recruiter sees that or not, we can't be sure nowadays because there's so many AI tooling helping filter that. Now, the other thing is just noise. I mean, by the time you filter out all the people that don't hit the job criteria or aren't, if it's a job in London that requires you to be on site 2 days a week, it's going to exclude anyone that is remote or says remote. And so the system will cut out anyone. You might say remote, but you might be able to go in once, twice a week. I mean, you've got to click apply, don't you? You've got to throw your CV into the pool to be part of it. But then if you can go that extra step and introduce yourself, reach out to the person, see if you've got any contacts, because the poor recruiters they're not hunting one job, they're searching, they're doing this 50 times over a week. And so the sheer number of people applying to get to that 20, to get down to that 3 that they've got to put across is a monumental amount of work. So AI is used in those tools and filters, and we as humans have to perhaps make a bit more effort with how we reach out to each other. I feel for the recruiters as well. Yeah, I am terrible at lead gen. I mean, I'm messaging people directly and go, "Hi, I'm Malik. So I'm a designer. This is what I do. This is the value I bring." I'm terrible at that. So I'm learning as I'm going. The other thing is that a lot of it is done through social media promotion and videoing and talking. That's not something that comes naturally to me. I've always shied away from that. So I'm having to learn now as someone who's older to become a bit more of a digital native and video myself and post it, whilst perhaps the younger generation have that advantage because that's second nature to them.
What I've observed, they're a bit more fearless, whereas seasoned people have an inherent bias of making mistakes, whereas the younger generation, they don't care about making mistakes, they care about results. So in a way, it is fascinating to learn from the younger generation, because when I was young, I was not as free as today's generation is. I was still restrained and hesitant. The question is that how do you cope up and compete with people who are sending 100 applications in a day? Whereas you, being more seasoned, you have a burden of knowledge on your shoulders.
It's a whole new experience, like I say, because things have flipped. In the past, first 5-6 years of running my own company, I just messaged on LinkedIn. I just announced that I was taking on work and people would come to me. Now I can shout and scream that I'm available and no one reaches out to me. So my tactic has to change. I'm still of the school where I like to nurture those relationships. I prefer to have a one-to-one. Have been doing this, like I say, for nearly 20 plus years as a designer. But now I've got the experience. I kind of refer to experience, knowledge, and expertise. I've also built contacts. People I've worked with over the last 10 years, let's say, colleagues have gone on to become the heads of department or CEOs or have founded things. So it's that network of people I've worked with in the past where I've always made an effort to work hard or deliver more than what I've been asked to deliver. So I deliver value and that reputation. So a lot of my contacts now, I'm just messaging directly and just saying I'm available or I'm taking on work. Do you have anything? Whether they have work or not is a different matter, but letting them know I'm available. I think the other thing I'm having to learn is to be a bit more mass market, to be a little bit more, what are the younger designers doing? Well, they're sharing stuff on social media. They're providing expertise to others and support. So I'm having to learn to do some of that as well, because you've got to be in that space as well. To be honest, whatever I do in that space, I'm not really generating any work, visible work, but it's learning new skills, learning, as the market changes and technology changes, and now we're doing everything on our phones through apps, and there's a lot more tooling coming out that I can create avatars and send stuff out and have a bit of fun with. For me, it's a learning curve anyway. I'm learning new technologies, I'm learning new tools. So that makes me feel like I'm staying ahead and current with technology. We talk about digital natives now. It's not like my kids are, they've grown up with PlayStations, they've grown up with phones from iPads from day one. So they're very used to it. My oldest is 16, youngest is 9. I, as a kid, I had a black and white TV. That makes me sound really old, but that's just because my mum didn't buy a color one for years. But, we're that generation where the internet came along and we got into it. Phones came along, we got into it. So we've had to learn these things. So I'm got no problem constantly learning new things as these technologies change and come in. And that generation of curiosity and learning is something that I've always really enjoyed. I'm very aware that at that point when the internet came in and I jumped at that, I was pretty young. I jumped at that. By the time I was at university, I was doing everything on the internet. There were a whole load of people probably now my age in work who didn't make that switch to digital, the internet, and very quickly became obsolete. And so that lesson learned is that we need to constantly evolve. We need to constantly learn new tools, whether it's hard work for us as an older generation and perhaps a younger generation like my kids. My son just 16, he just flies through a computer. He games, he flies through PC. We won't get on a Mac. I tried giving him a Mac and saying, look, this is how you do design. My daughter's an amazing artist that is going to clearly go down the graphic design route or illustration. And I'm like, here's a Mac. And they're not interested. They just want the PC to do gaming. So, they'll get there, but it is very intuitive to them. I mean, my daughter sits over Wacom pen drawing on the computer in whatever tooling. She signs into all my accounts of everything and uses Photoshop, Animate and stuff. I am a little bit threatened by that because I quickly realized that to the younger generation, my kids, the stuff that I prize myself on having these skills, they're already learning. So yeah, absolutely. As an older generation, we've got to constantly learn, evolve, keep going. And one thing I got taught at university by my design tutors, like, it's never too late to learn. You can be a mature student. You can be 70 and doing, your degree or studying. There's no, you don't do it when you're younger and not when you're older. And that's something that I'm trying to teach my kids now is that you don't have to go to university. Now you can go to it when you're older. You can go to it whenever you want. You don't have to go to university. Just as long as you're always learning, evolving, trying new things, you'll be fine.
How do you keep abreast with the latest advancements in technology? Because by the time you master one, you have already somebody else has outpaced you. So you have to relearn and move on. So how do you cope up with that?
It's a good one. I mean, I've literally just spent today cancelling various different AI tooling that I've been playing around with just because I realized that my monthly bill was coming to about £400 or £500. Because it is, it's a lot of money. Because it is an exciting time. So I was having subscriptions to a tool called Manus AI, which is fantastic. I was subscription to Lovable, Bolt. I've got a subscription to a tool called Perplexity. I've got ChatGPT, Gemini, all these things. And I've got in my browser, I've got a little folder of paid AI versus free ones. And the paid AI was getting longer and longer and longer. And I was like, oh, I've got to cancel this. Easier. I'm playing a lot, and Hagen, I'm playing a lot with creating AI avatar versions of myself and sharing some of that on social media platforms. Part of it's I've got to be there, I've got to try to generate work, but also a lot of it is, what can I do with this stuff? First of all, I've got to learn it. I've got to learn it in real life. And then I can understand how I can introduce that to my workflow. Does it bring value to what I'm doing as an independent consultant trying to promote my own business? Or can I bring it into my clients' work to help solve some of their problems, or can I bring it in to help them solve ways of working? A lot of these tools, what I'm finding is difficult. They're all subscription based. So you start with a free model, you do something, and then it's no, you can't. You've run out of points, or you've run out of coins or credits. And you think, oh, it's only £35, £40 a month. That's not a lot, or mostly in dollars. You can, it's even cheaper. It's $50. That's not much in pounds. And so you sign up to it and you think, I'll try it for a month. And then the month goes and you've suddenly got all these things coming out. What I tend to do is I tend to do the free trials of this technology because there's a lot going on at the moment. a lot of them are just sat on top of things like ChatGPT or
Yep.
Gemini. So, it's a nice tool, but ultimately you're just paying multiple times for ChatGPT. And then ChatGPT rolls out an update and suddenly you don't need that tool anymore. So there's a lot of that going on. But my litmus test is like, I sign up, I'll go for it on a trial, I'll pay for it if I want to extend that trial. And then I'll see at the end of the month, if it's not part of my workflow or if I'm not excited by it as a tool, I'll cancel it. And what I am excited about at the moment, and maybe this is a little bit of a fad, but creating AI avatars, recording my voice, creating AI clones, applying that to things, and then seeing what I can connect it to, and then thinking I can create an AI version of me. Chatting to a few colleagues a couple of nights ago, they were saying, why do you need an AI version of you? Can't you just record yourself? And I'm like, every time I record myself, I have to do so many cuts and so many takes, but this my workflows, I can hammer out a script in ChatGPT. I can then put that into another tool. I can create an AI tool, render of myself talking. I can edit it so that it's articulate and English rather than words I wouldn't necessarily use. And then I can use my voice clone and send that out. And that's something that I'm not a presenter. I'm not an actor. So I was finding myself spending days trying to do something that was 30 seconds. Now I can produce something in a matter of minutes that is 30 seconds or a couple of minutes long to get my point across. Because I want to spend more time promoting my services, and I want to promote my services, but focus more time on delivering the services, not promote my services and have no time to deliver.
Very interesting concept. I think the more you experience, you have so much knowledge. You also have to, at some point in your career, you have to productize your knowledge, because obviously you have finite capacity as a solo individual, and you have to place that capacity in strategic work as opposed to mundane work. So replicating yourself into smaller chunks can add tremendous value. I mean, that is how corporations work. They create a small value proposition and they replicate it. I mean, SaaS was the genesis of it, right? You create a smaller service and then you make it accessible to everybody as a subscription model, which is what we are paying for. But I think we're at the right inflection point where knowledge workers like yourself, who have built a lot of solid body of work across a number of years in the industry, you can now replicate your knowledge and then make it more accessible to more people than you would have had the capacity to do it one-to-one individually. So in a way, I think it's a good way to create economic viability for you as a solo individual. And again, as an independent consultant. And this is the problem space that I'm working on. How we can unlock more economic opportunities for solo creators and professionals to expand their economic horizons, right? So in a way, this is a golden opportunity. More and more people are, for right or wrong reasons, either dissing the traditional employment route or just sheer lack of jobs in the market, are going solo. I mean, there is a massive macro trend. This is really, really helpful for people to get their footing in the door. But more importantly, try and learn by not spending too much time and not investing a lot into it. For people who are young, I think it's really good. They can tinker with a lot of tools. And again, it's just a 1 monthly subscription. You try free, and then if you like it, then you commit. If you don't, then it's only a monthly obligation, provided you cancel. That's also another podcast in altogether on dark design patterns, which companies are still using these days. But very pertinent to the conversation is, you have a subscription tax, which used to be not a problem in our day, right? I mean, in the days where we used to work in John Lewis, the only software that as consultants we were meant to carry was Axure, if you're a UX, and a Sketch license, if you are a UI person.
Yeah, I have both.
Yeah,
and probably a few others as well, whilst experimenting with the tools.
Yeah, experimenting aside, I think the core requirement of the job was only one or the other. And again, if you're a hybrid, you'll carry both. I used to carry both as well. These days, I think all companies, in my opinion, and I do a lot of consulting as well, they're more concerned about the tools, because which tool is going to be the mainstay in their organization. And a lot of time is dragged in just selecting the right tool. Whereas we live in the golden age is in a way problematic as well, because we have a paradox of choice. 90% of time is spent in tool selection, whereas focusing, which could have been spent on solving the real problem. The real problem in businesses are still the same. If you're an e-commerce company, how do you get more people to not abandon the basket and commit to a purchase? If you are an advertising company, how many people are watching your ads and then paying click? So again, business problems that remain the same. It's all about how you maximize the bottom line. Now, my question to you is somebody who's been there in the industry for long and you understand how organizations work. Organizations work to maximize shareholder value, which is a clever way of saying make money.
Yeah.
What advice would you give to people who are new to the industry? Because you can be very well confused and enamored at the same time, drown yourself into the slurry of knowledge around tool selection, the technologies, and what have you. The fundamental truths remain the same. And most employers, whoever are employing, either somebody as a consultant or as a full-time employee, the most important question is how are you or your work is going to make me more money? So how do you articulate that as an individual contractor, independent consultant? And what advice would you give to people to focus more on the commercial sides as much as you would do on the domain side?
It's a good question. I think the second part was I'll jump into first. I think that as designers or as product managers or as researchers, whatever the discipline is, we learn those skills through working, through either study or on the job or through other people. And those skills are cool. That's a given. So when I'm engaged to go into a client and deliver design skills, that's a given. That's what I go. Quite often, there are tools we have to work with them. We have to adapt. There are a lot of new tools, a lot of new ways of working. A lot of that's changing. So to be the designer, I sometimes have to go in and help consult with how that process should be set up so that I can get on with the design. But I think one of the things that's becoming more and more visible to me, if I look back over the last 5-7 years, what I've noticed is that there's a lot of talented designers out there. However, nowadays that's not enough. You can't just be a designer and go in and design stuff. You've got to be commercially minded as well, because ultimately, as you say, I'm engaged, and maybe it's slightly different in government, but they're still running on budgets, they're still running on finance, there's a profit and loss, there's a cost to people doing work. And I have done quite a few public sector jobs, and it's very similar. But in an e-commerce private sector, it's really obvious. You are there to help that company make more money. How do they make more money? We tweak things like, conversion and engagement to try and, get more revenue. But the designers, quite often we get swallowed up with making things look amazing and are amazing. Of course, that should be a given. We are designers. That's what we've got to do. We've got to make things easier for the customer, but we are not very good understanding what the business needs are. And I don't just mean like a business need where someone goes, we need this new feature, because that to me is not a business need. A business need is like, well, what is the business going to do? They're missing sales and there's an opportunity here, or their sales have gone down, or perhaps the customer base has changed. Times means that customer bases change and patterns change in behavior. So how do we as designers support that business, not just from a customer experience point of view, but from a business experience point of view, and to help them be more commercially viable? And I think that's something, if I was advising new designers coming into the industry, yes, focus on your design, focus on your process and getting that experience, but also focus on being commercially minded, because at some point in your career, you're either going to end up as a leader, and the higher you go in the design industry, the more commercially minded you've got to be, or you're going to go out as a freelancer or set up your own company like I have, where you still need to be financially viable. I mean, I still get jobs, people offering me work, and I'm turning it down because it's not financially viable. It's not worth my time doing the job because I'll make a loss. Yes, it is always about making delivering a better customer experience, but you have to be financially minded. You have to be commercially minded. You have to be aware that the reason you're being employed is to help that business achieve something. And I think without that understanding, and designers, we're quite often not involved in that process. We're brought in, we're told this is the project you've got to deliver. You don't necessarily get a lot of the visibility on the cost and impact to the organization. So it's very hard for us to say, look, we delivered this, it's brought huge amounts of value. That then might lead on to the next project, or you pitching more work to them at a higher rate, or negotiating a pay rise. And I think that is a bit of a challenge at the moment. That would be my advice. Anyone starting out new, learn the business side and the design side as well.
Speaking of tools, and again, we are coming back to this again. What is the most useful tool for you in your current work?
The most useful tool. I think I do use a range of tools. I obviously use tools like Figma because that's an expected thing to do nowadays. Again, 5+ years ago, as you mentioned in a previous question, we were using Xura or using Sketch. The whole industry moved, changed. Figma is a fantastic tool, and they're doing a lot in AI to improve processes. However, a lot of my work is done through research. So I'm talking to subject matter experts and I'm learning, or I'm talking to customers, or I'm talking to business experts so that I can really understand what the problems are and what causes those problems. So to me, that comes down to conversational. I've got to meet those people. I've got to talk to them. I've got to ask them questions. So the tools I'm using now for that include a lot of transcription, a lot of then bringing that transcription out. And I do use a lot of AI tooling to turn transcriptions in from research into summary, key paper points, pulling out and extracting the information I need to help me create those reports and feedback to the client. Because I've run the research sessions, I'm able to go through the output and correct and fill out any points. And I tend to keep it very factual. I don't like AI in that situation filling in gaps. If I'm doing something a bit more creative, and once I've identified what a problem is and what the cause is, and I'm going back to the AI tooling to try and find some ideas or play with some ideas I've got, I come into it to bring in that hallucination and those concepts and go a bit crazy. So at the moment, my tooling is Figma for a lot of design work. I'm using that for mapping and research, tools like FigJam. I use a lot of Miro. Whether I'm not using FigJam, it depends on the clients. But I am using a lot of AI tooling. And at the moment, my client is BluePP, so I have access to working within their AI toolset, which is fantastic, and working with their clients on that.
Speaking of research tools, and I mean, my personal experience, I've done many UX research, core, applied, user testing research projects. A part of the frustration personally, but more importantly from the client perspective. Research being very qualitative, I call it time intensive for the right reasons. It's because it's got to be paid attention to, all the right inferences, all the right analysis needs to be done. AI has got a great potential in helping the cycle time of conducting an end-to-end research. And the biggest, I would say, value for people, consultants and clients is the fact that it's made the data gathering process quite easier. I mean, back in the day, I did a UX research study for the phone provider here in the UK. The research took 6 weeks to complete. And the client just kept stressing the fact that, it's going to be Christmas time. So the peak season is going to be just round the clock. So we need the output quite quickly as possible. But because it is a limiting factor, right? I mean, you have to send screeners, you have to hire an agency to recruit candidates, and then you have to shortlist them, then you have to organize it, and then you have to facilitate the research, and then you have to record the sessions, and then you have to individually revisit the conversation, kind of extract the findings, and then you have to compile it into a report, and then you have to present it to the stakeholder. It's a very structured process, but you can't cut corners. It's only because, research qualitative is harder to conduct than an A/B testing cohort analysis, for example. AI has been a lifesaver in those aspects, as you suggested. I mean, I speak to a lot of people for my startup and then extract their insights. So you can call it remote user testing. Transcription tools are a lifesaver because then you can summarize your meeting and things that you might have forgotten. You have it in front of you and then you can synthesize it to extract more insights out of it. So the cycle time is reduced. The question is then, do you think that it is going in a direction where it's going to make a few roles redundant? For example, UX research in general. There are companies which are creating synthetic users where you don't have to interview real users because the training data is actually captured from real users. In a way, they have replicated actual users into synthetic ones, and it can be run programmatically. So what do you think about few jobs becoming redundant or being less relevant? Or in an ideal case, the willingness to pay for a client to conduct research, like shrinking from 30 grand a research project for a week or two to saying that I am only able to pay $1,000 and I need it in one day. What's your take on it?
I think, I mean, there's a lot to break down there. I mean, let's say, I mean, when we worked at John Lewis, John Lewis has its own research lab and observation room. I spent a lot of time observing. They have, or at the time, I'm sure they still do, dedicated researchers who are trained and qualified in that space. As we know, running research is more than just, looking at what they're doing and typing up notes. There's a whole, it's all about the psychology and human behavior. So it takes expertise to do that. I think in your example where there's a lot of AI tooling that can use AI users and you can question them, there's probably some valid use cases for that. Maybe that can fit into the process somewhere, perhaps a little bit further down. I think we'll see changes across all disciplines. So not just research, but design and product and content, because as AI tooling comes in, it's going to allow people to access to tools that they couldn't necessarily do before. So I post articles on LinkedIn. Now I write the article out myself and I stick it through AI to clean it up because my English writing is not great. And I feel confident I can post that like that. So bringing it into my process to clean up my own thinking enables me to do something that I wasn't able to do before. I think, though, that you still need the experts. You still need the experts running that stuff. So you'll still need the researchers observing the users. You still need real users. But the researchers can use the tooling to speed up the delivery of things. Now, I won't name any names. I haven't mentioned them here, but I worked with one client who basically engaged a research company to be on the books to do their research. So when we went into this client and we said, look, we need to do some research on this customer journey, my client was like, well, we've got this agency we'll use. So, the agency quote for 1 day research in a lab. It wasn't really a lab. It's just like 2 meeting rooms and user comes in, sits down and does some stuff on a laptop. And, the observer observes and turns that into a report was the number you mentioned. It's like nearly 30 grand. So the client didn't bother doing it because they could never get their money signed off to do 1 day's worth of research and then, wait a week for the report. So they skipped it. So I think what we're going to see here is that delivery can, perhaps the cost can come down, but the quality of the delivery can go up. So yes, you can probably whiz through loads of research in 1 day. You could do 5 or 6 interviews in a day, chuck the transcriptions through an AI, chuck out a report by the next morning. But all we're doing there is devaluing a core skill. A researcher will be able to run those research sessions, speed up their process, but then add more value into what comes out of that with their own human input into that. You can't just chuck it through an AI and out comes all the human behavioral stuff. Specifically, as we don't, from what I've relearned at John Lewis, is that they don't just listen to what the user's saying. They look at the reactions, the behavior, what they're doing. That's perhaps down the line, AI can do that if you have the right setup. But at the moment, I don't think it can. And so we have to be able to deliver things, I guess, more cost effectively for the business. We go back to the point that we are providing services to business that's trying to be profitable and increase its margins. If we can deliver quality services at a price that is better for the customer, but we can still deliver and make money out of it, then why not? And I think AI tooling is going to help us to do that, not necessarily replace it. But yeah, things will change. We'll see less designers needed, less researchers needed, less content people needed, but also AI will create lots of new jobs. So we just don't know what those jobs are yet.
We all are anxious and eagerly waiting. I think it's safe to say that there is a lot of transformation, not from organization perspective, but purely from the labor market perspective as well. I think this is where everybody is either bullish or bearish or looking at doomsday scenarios. Again, the room is divided. There are no right or wrong answers as of now, but it's an exciting
exactly.
time.
I don't think, at the moment we can say, the last few years have been a bit up and down in the industry. Coming out of COVID, we saw, or during COVID, we saw, once we settled into COVID and everyone realized that they need to up their standard of digital and services, a lot of the companies ramped up their hiring of designers and product people because they realized they needed to do a better job of online sales. Funnily enough, John Lewis, when they switched off their in-store shopping, their online, sustained. It grew. The revenue grew, but the platform was solid because they had a solid process and would spend, the team there spent a lot of time building something very robust and scalable. A lot of other companies discovered that their online services weren't good enough, so they hired big teams to come in and do that. We then saw a phase after that where those companies realized that maybe they'd overhired. They built huge teams, they didn't need them, they cost a lot, they weren't necessarily needed, so they shrunk them down a little bit. So we saw lots of people flood into the market then. Now what I think we're seeing is something slightly differently, and it's not that our jobs are being replaced by AI, because we're not there yet. We know AI is on the horizon. That's impacting perhaps people's clients' kind of investment in technologies, because they're like, oh, we don't know where to invest the money because it's got to be AI, but we're not quite sure what that means. But the reason that I believe we're seeing teams shrink down or less hiring of designers and product people is because we're not able to clearly show the value that we deliver. We go in, there's a bums on seats cost to us being there, but we're not able to say like, here we've delivered this amazing new service or this amazing new platform, and then have visibility on the fact that we've increased your sales by 2 billion a year, because a team that can really measure the value it delivers the organization, it's on the profit and loss. That team might cost 1 million a year to have in up and running. That team's got to deliver 3 to 5 million pounds worth of value for the business. So if we as designers and we as product managers are sat there not getting the visibility on that, then it's very hard for us to support the business deliver what they're trying to do. And someone at a senior management level is looking at profit and loss and going, well, this team costs 1 million, but they're not making any money for us because they're not necessarily measuring it. So we don't need that team. And that to me is a big risk to us. So how we deliver value is super, super crucial to our existence.
Speaking of value, would love to learn more about the work you're doing at FlawlessCX and with special emphasis on CX.
Yes, of course. So FlawlessCX, I started the company in 2014. I changed the name around 3 or 4 years ago to FlawlessCX, but they're fundamentally still the same. For me, my focus is how can I package my services as a designer, my experience, knowledge, and expertise in the industry, perhaps slightly try to offer more value than say some of the younger designers into the industry, because I want to be able to sell my experience, and that's 10, 15 years in the current way of working. And so FlawlessCX to me is about selling consultancy services, which is my bread and butter, but then trying to package and sell value. And the way that I'm doing that is trying to, like I say, package what I'm doing, and that is focusing on discovery, really. And I think that to me is key. And I think, creating a design solution is something we as designers should be able to do as a given. But what I'm finding from my experience with clients is that if we design a solution without knowing what the problem is and what causes the problem, it's not really a solution. It doesn't bring any benefit to the business. So how do we solve that? We need to focus on knowing exactly what the problems are and what causes them. And if you do that, then what I'm finding is that the solution is normally there. It's not, someone's already done it. When we're working in e-com or finance companies or even car companies, which I've done quite a few, we're not really designing anything completely new that's never been done before. We're designing solutions to their existing problems. And I think the key to that success is to know what causes the problem. And we do tend to kind of rush into solutions. So FlawlessCX really focuses on the discovery, which is, research, it's mapping, it's speaking to subject matter experts, speaking to users, gathering all that information, trying to frame the pain points on the existing service, if it is an existing service, and provide consultancy to the organization to tell them the direction they need to go in. And what I'm finding that does is it enables us to deliver a really viable solution that means that the clients save money. If you know exactly what the solution is, you can deliver it quickly and easily. That saves you money. You don't waste during development, building things that don't work. You don't hit your bottom line in a really bad way by pushing something out to live that delivers zero value for the business. So sometimes slowing down and getting the company to think a little bit more about that discovery and understanding what those problems are is crucial. It's also the hardest bit, because we as humans love jumping to solutionizing and designing. It's the fun bit. The hard work is, finding the problem and what causes it.
I agree. It's 90% solving or understanding the problem and then only 10% solving it. Alex, pleasure talking to you. Thank you for your time, and really, really appreciate you taking time out for me on this lovely Friday afternoon. Thank you.
Well, thank you for having me, and I hope that some of the stories and insights that I've chatted about have been useful.
Absolute pleasure, mate.